Right, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Well done for making it this far into conference, especially those of you who were at Conservative Conference last week. It's been quite a long time.
Poor things.
I'm Alan Nixon, Head of Science and Technology here at Onward. We're delighted to welcome you here to the panel today. We're here to talk about place-based strategies to drive innovation. So we know that the current government have plans for science superpower ambitions, and Labour, as we've seen, have similarly grand ambitions when it comes to science and technology. And whilst lots of these strategies start the international, and they're, as we say, very, very grand for what it means for Britain's place in the world, this starts at home. And we know that to drive this innovation, lots of this goes down to local place-based strategies in order to drive that innovation. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Not least because too often I think we'll find that local economies are underpowered, but we know at the same time we've got world-leading research that we can tap into, and the harnessing of those two things to help drive innovation, it can be really powerful for driving these grand ambitions that we have. I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel for you here today. On my right, we have Dr. Shaid Mahmood of Durham University, who are kindly partnering with us for this event today. We have Rain Newton-Smith, who's Director General of the CBI. On my left, we have Onwurah, who's Shadow Minister for Science, Research and Innovation, and who's also MP not too far from Durham in central Newcastle. And finally, we have Sarah Main, who is Executive Director for the Campaign for Science and Engineering. So what we'll do is we'll turn to each of our panelists first to give their opening remarks for, say, 3 to 5 minutes, and then we will turn to questions from there. Chi, can I turn to you first, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Alan, and it's great to be here. I hope some of you had a chance to hear Kia's fantastic speech, and in a great speech covering so much. He did single out innovation, science, and particularly the life sciences as being key to our, or being critical for our economic policies. And that's, I'm really proud, and particularly I'm a chartered engineer. I spent 20 years in tech before coming into Parliament. I grew up and I was inspired to go into engineering by our great engineering heritage in the Northeast. And so I'm particularly proud to be part of a front bench which recognises and seizes, on the opportunity and the potential of science and innovation, as being key to our economy, key to our growth, and as a consequence, and it was there in the hall, growth for improve people's living standards. It's key to improving people's quality of life. It is a key. Science and innovation are not something that happen in ivory towers in Durham or anywhere else. They are something that happens in and contributes to people's experience of life. And that's why it is key to our Labour missions for government, including our first mission, particularly our first mission, to secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, which is an ambitious ambition and very ambitious target, especially when you consider the lack of growth we've had in our economy for the last 13 years. So there's a huge potential that science and innovation hold for our country, and our industrial strategy highlights the potential use of our world-leading research, which in places like Durham University, also Newcastle University, and other universities across the country. We've got great universities, skilled workforce, and deep capital markets, although it may not always seem like that. And we want to use them to help create new regional clusters and rebalance the national economy. So science and innovation play a huge role in Labour's plans to build up strong and self-sufficient regional economies. That's what, as a North East MP, I want a regional economy which is self-sufficient. It's not dependent on Whitehall handouts. And I do applaud the work of Steve Rotham, the mayor, who has pledged to secure annual R&D investment equal to 5% of the Liverpool City region's GVA by 2030 as part of his place-based innovation strategy. And Labour would look would work in partnership with the private sector, with universities across our country, to develop bespoke, place-based approaches to driving regional development. And in particular, we want to see, some of that. We've got great examples of spin-out and startup culture in universities. We want to see the best practices shared across our country, so that we have regional economic engines of growth clustering around our universities across our country. And we can build a globally competitive, innovative country if investment and opportunity is available across the country. And that's what Labour is focused on delivering should we be elected. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Sarah, can I come to you next, please?
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you all for coming. My name's Sarah Main, and I'm the Executive Director of the Campaign for Science and Engineering. And we have a purpose, which is to put science and engineering at the heart of the UK's future in a way that benefits people's lives and livelihoods. So I'm really pleased to be trying to tackle this question today. We represent around just over 100 member organisations, which include universities, businesses, research charities, public sector research establishments, public engagement centres, and many more right across the UK. And we have used that breadth of membership and the insights that they can give us to examine this particular question in two recent reports. One is called The Power of Place, looking at maximising local economic impacts from research and innovation, and the other is called The Skills Opportunity, and I recommend them both to you, and my colleague Camilla at the back of the room helped write The Skills Opportunity, so please talk to her about that. When we talk about terms of science and innovation and R&D, I think they can seem rather abstract. I think that's one of the reasons why the science superpower tagline falls flat with many people. It feels somewhat meaningless. And often we talk about the benefits of science and R&D in meta terms, in national aggregated economic statistics. But science and research and innovation happens in places. It is characterized by, and I think characterizes, localities, history, and people. And I think Keir Starmer did reference that in his speech today. He referred to particular types of scientists and engineers in particular types of areas. And we can think about, I'll let Shaid talk about Durham. I won't steal his thunder, but if we think about different places like Aberdeen, Belfast, Aberystwyth, the Knowledge Quarter in London around King's Cross Station, they all have excellent research and scientific strengths, and they are all characterised in different ways. Their strengths are different. They're characterised by their locality, and they contribute to their locality. So the benefits of science and research can be reaped nationally and globally, but I think we can think harder and do better on how to reap the benefits locally. Durham has an excellent story to tell on this. I will let him do that. So I want to just point to three things to help you and us in this room think about what can be done to do this better. Skills, strengths, and support. So skills. I think very often in my career, people have talked about scientists and engineers as globally mobile, nationally mobile at least. We often think about immigration policy, we think about scientists moving to where the best science is. It's quite a kind of cultural thing. But what about thinking instead of science and innovation opportunities for people who live and want to stay and identify with their local area, their local community? I think many actors, civic leadership, research communities can do more to raise awareness of R&D opportunities locally and better connect to local people the careers in R&D industries on their doorstep. Those careers are not limited to being a scientist, an entrepreneur, or an innovator themselves. There's obviously a wealth of careers that are associated with innovation-intensive industries that everyone can access. Local leaders need to be involved in thinking about regional opportunities and skills requirements in their area, And essentially, we need to make places attractive to live, to retain skilled people, and support regional innovation. Now, being attractive to live looks quite different if you're in the very high house price area of Oxford trying to work in their innovation, very successful innovation district, or if you're the Babraham Institute a couple of miles outside Cambridge struggling to get people to come that extra couple of miles to your institute. There are different challenges to making somewhere attractive to live and remain, but I think that is really important to help grow the skills base around innovation. I will speed up. Strengths, R&D strengths. Now, in the Power of Place report, we looked at R&D strengths across the UK, and I think the key message is really that firstly, you need to know and understand your R&D strengths and capacity in your local area. We took from many conversations around the UK that it's probably most productive if investment is focused on R&D excellence that already exists, whatever its size. It might be nascent, it might be emerging, it might be highly established, but building on what is already there is helpful. Strong leadership from local government, civic groups, and the research sector together is really important. And where you see examples of where research and innovation really is helping local areas flourish economically, you'll find that that has been driven often by a small number of committed individuals across civic bodies and research leaders in academia and industry. So I think looking to central and local government to work together with research and innovation communities is obviously going to be vitally important. There are good examples to look at, and I think there are importantly policy levers we can consider as to how to give greater power and authority to local and regional civic leaders in order to drive their own innovation agenda. Finally, on support. By support, I mean public support. We at the Campaign for Science and Engineering have done a major public opinion study in the last year or so that reveals really interesting findings about what people feel across the UK about research and innovation. It broadly shows that there's a high degree of support and that people think research and innovation is important. 70% support research and innovation in broad terms. But people don't feel that it's urgent, and they don't feel that it necessarily benefits them or people like them or people in their area. And what comes through very strongly is that the way to better engage and actually create more meaningful benefit is to connect research and innovation ambitions to places and to purposes. And when you do that, people's support for research and innovation changes drastically. I've heard during this conference of others talking particularly around some AI data surveys that say kind of similar things that I think was done by the Ada Lovelace Institute. So just to give you an example of that, we hear from that data that people trust local messengers, they express pride about local research. When asked, 66% of people would support a research lab being built in their area. And that's against choices they were given of a new retail park, a factory, a number of other choices. A research lab was the second most popular out of all the options against a school. So there is enthusiasm, and we could see that people supported it because it would bring in high quality jobs, opportunities for people in their local area. So I think this conference has been full of discussion about growth, and whichever party gets in at the next election, I think they will want to tackle growth. We know that parties and the research community are committed to research and innovation as part of a growth agenda. To me, the question we're tackling today is how you invest that financial commitment. Where do you direct it around the UK? How do you manage our outstanding scientific and research capability in the UK in order to deliver maximum local personal benefit?
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Rain, can I turn to you next, please?
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's great to be here. And I thank you to Onwurah and also the University of Durham for bringing us together. And once an economist who started a career at the Bank of England, it never really leaves you. So I will set some of my remarks in the economic context we're facing, but then I think reference some of the things we've seen over the past couple of days here and previously. But I think, look, we know it's a very critical time for our economy, certainly for our politics and for business. And we are, the backdrop is, obviously a difficult one globally, absolutely. But I think in terms of our economy here, we've seen around living standards. So I think just hearing all the conversation with this focus around investment, around business investment, around innovation, around people has been really important to hear, because we know the only way to have sustainable increases in standard of living is really about raising our growth and productivity. And yet we're facing into that in a period with, still high inflation and challenges around skills and rising capital costs. And that cost of living crisis, that squeeze on real household incomes will be here, and expected to fall for the second year running. So we really do need to think forward. I think having that ambition on growth, and as we heard Keir Starmer set out, that ambition to have the highest sustained growth in the G7 will be difficult to achieve. And I think it really does need to be focused on a plan for investment, for innovation, for people, and how we bring them together. And I think it's important that we don't forget planet within that as well, and not just climate, but thinking about nature. And I know there's been many conversations around that over the past couple of days, but I think innovation will also lie at the heart of how we adopt green technologies and how we address the need to move our economy towards a net zero economy. And I think many of us welcomed what Keir Starmer said about speeding ahead in that adoption of green technologies to get us there. But I think in terms of how we think about place within that broader context, I think what we know and what we recognise from the experience in the UK over what is almost a decade into the English regional devolution journey is we can't do all of this solely from Whitehall. We really need to see powers to the regions and some of those strategies developed by those closest to their local regional economies who understand the challenges. And certainly as someone who spent quite a long time of growing up in Canada with a much more federal system, it's something I definitely relate to. So I think the acceleration of that place-based growth, so how do we do that, and what's the role of innovation and science within that? Well, first of all, I think it's rolling out, these devolution settlements to all English regions who want them, developing devolution policies that go further and deeper, and whether it's the work of Steve Rotherham around Liverpool, or Andy Street in Birmingham, or Andy Burnham or in Manchester. I think we can see metro mayors, and there are obviously more beyond that, who can be real ambassadors for their region and importantly on a global stage as well. And I think that does matter, because whether it's thinking about what we need to do around the green growth and opportunities, we know with what the US is pursuing around IRA and the EU Green Deal, the rest of the world is not standing still. So we have to put this in an international context, undoubtedly. Second, I think we need to build on some of the things and use, and I know we've spoken, Chida wrote a separate panel too, where it was great to hear her talk about using some of the existing mechanisms we have, and, that any future government would use some of that to think about how we build on investment zones, how we think about some of the initiatives that have been set out to develop economic clusters. We need to build on that. So, and it's been good to hear about that partnership between business and government to really deliver some of that and leverage some of the UK's world-leading capability around R&D. And I think that really also is, secondly, very much founded around our universities and thinking. I've had so many conversations over the past couple of weeks with our universities as well as our FE colleges, and thinking about the broader ecosystems that can be built around universities and skills and what they do for their local area. And we're so lucky in the UK to have world-leading universities in almost every region of the UK, and I think we need to absolutely nurture that. And I think, we've seen it as well. It was good to see, the UK being an associate member of the EU Horizon programme. I think we need to build on that. That's something that we, as a business organisation, push strongly for. It. We've seen firsthand what it means for many businesses, and how important it is around innovation to have international collaboration on some of these technologies and research. So I think we need to build on that as well. And I suppose finally, just thinking about place and where we are here in the north of England, there are more universities across the north of England in the world top 250 than in Italy, Spain and France combined. So it really is a powerhouse of knowledge, and one that we need to develop. And even from a science point of view, a quarter of the UK STEM graduates are from universities in the north. So I think there's much we can build on, but we need to develop further on some of that devolution and giving power to local communities. We need to nurture our universities and what they provide into local ecosystems, but also provide some of the horizontal drivers that really enable business investment and innovation, whether that's thinking about capital allowances, whether that's thinking about how we have a landscape that really nurtures innovation and R&D more broadly. So really looking forward to discussing further.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ren. And finally, Shaid.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Look, first of all, just to say, I'm sure our Chair of Council, Joe, would echo this, that Durham University is absolutely delighted to sponsor this event. And I think given Keir's speech, I mean, the timing of this event, I don't think could have been any better, really. So maybe we knew something that other people didn't. And a massive thank you to all the panel members here for your contributions and the Q&A that we'll go on to. My name's Shaid Mahmood. I'm the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at Durham University. And as I've said in a different place, please don't let that title fool you. I actually have a background in science, engineering and advanced manufacturing, as well as local government, and 25 years as a governor in further education as well. So I'm hugely passionate about education, skills and learning, and the opportunities that provided for people of my generation from my particular community in inner city Manchester. And I really do feel very strongly that government of any type needs to deploy the talents of all of our people in all of our communities, and it just feels like to me that we've dropped off that, and there's an opportunity, I think, to think about how we are very, very inclusive in the way that we take the workforce and development of skills forward, because that will help to improve productivity and give us a better sense of belonging. And the fact is, pace of change is accelerating, and some of us are perhaps better at dealing with change than others, but the reality is it can leave people and communities behind and at odds with each other. And universities have got a core mission that's very much about delivering a skilled workforce to support the kind of economic growth that we now need to see. But organisations, universities like Durham University, where they are very research intensive, have a very, very specific role in the way the colleagues are describing. It is very much about developing human and social capital. It is about strengthening and helping to strengthen the business environment, and it is about fostering innovation. And if you can package that together, you've got gold dust. And in Durham, increasingly in the last few years, we've adopted a twin-track approach. The first one is to work with businesses and local devolved arrangements to really kind of help innovate and create and upskill the region. And the second element is our role in Durham University as an anchor institution, as part of an anchor network that is connected to local communities. So things like the LSIPs, the local skills improvement plans, are an incredibly important part of what Durham University is about, and working with our local institutions, especially, I declare an interest. I'm also the chair of the Association of Colleges, and I chair a large college board. It's really important that we work with our local further education colleges. They have a reach and penetration into local neighbourhoods and communities that actually could be the envy of Durham University. So that's why we're creating those partnerships, to really connect with further education in a major way. And if HE and FE can connect very powerfully, you've got there the makings of the kind of skills development that we need in the country to really help us grow. And in that way, what Durham University is seeking to do is to harness the talents of all the young people of the region, not just those that get the higher grade A levels that go on to higher tariff universities in the Russell Group like Durham University. But it does require us to have really effective systems leadership skills in those institutions and those organisations, to shake hands with each other, to collaborate and perhaps compete a lot less, and make sure that we're putting the learner at the heart of what we're doing in the educational ecosystem. And that's really a massive opportunity in terms of responding to economic growth, but also skills development as well. And I'm really proud to say I've only been at Durham for 18 months, but already in discussing things and working with colleagues, I can see that the university is doing a lot already. In space technology, we're already commercialising some world-leading deep space expertise that we had. So it's not just about producing papers, it's actually thinking about how we commercialise all of that experience and that intellectual property to really put it out there, to really advance the cause. We were talking earlier on about Net Park, which is a local science business park where we've got access to local scientists and engineers and an international science community, and we've got infrastructure and support and resources all sat in that place for businesses to really get in and involved and to compete with the best in the world. And in terms of sustainability in the environment, Durham's just positioned itself extremely well to lead a research hub, £21.3 million, to decarbonise the UK's marine sector. So there's already great stuff that Durham and other universities are doing, and there's an opportunity, I think, to get in behind that and really accelerate that. The second element of my contribution was going to be about place, really, and the importance of place. And sometimes universities like Durham get criticised for having a very international focus, but not necessarily looking at what's around it, where its buildings are and the people that it employs in the locality and local learners or the region. And from Durham University's perspective, if to local communities and to local people, place really, really does matter. Most children and young people spend 20% of the time in schools. So the other 80% of the time, they're usually in and around 10 or 15 streets of where they live or in the local town centre or city centre. So place really matters to families and to communities and to children and young people. So really it should matter to all of us, shouldn't it? And it should matter to us as institutions as well. And that's why we took the opportunity this year, working with our university community, to refresh our purpose as an organisation and our values. And our purpose is very much about, it's kind of going back to brass tacks, really. What are we about as a university? And therefore, what are we about in terms of the community that we then serve? And that advancement of learning is absolutely front and centre. But it's the way that we deliver that purpose. And that's why in our purpose statements and our values, we talk about promoting inclusivity, about having civic responsibility, about sustainability being centre, and about social well-being of all of our communities, whether they're local, in the region, national or international. And that's now fundamental to the university's approach. It's part of our university strategy refresh. But importantly, it puts the heart into wealth creation and prosperity for the North East region. And that's a huge step for a university like Durham University, and we're really pleased that we've taken it. And it's because we think it's really important that we have not just growth for growth's sake, that we have good growth and that it's inclusive. And you know, so we do have to be mindful when we create clusters and other things that actually we set those innovation clusters in the context of a broader regional development strategy that takes all of those neighbourhoods and communities into account. And so finally, just to touch on the government piece, really, and I think we've heard some fantastic stuff today, and a real commitment to getting in behind innovation. But as well as being open to fiscal incentives, I think there's some really strong interventions that government could make that actively encourage research and development. I think a modern industrial strategy and a skills strategy, I think, have got to be done. I can't believe that we're you know in 2023 and we haven't got that really rooted. You know, a skills strategy and a modern industrial strategy that really rewards innovation, that it promotes a much more collaborative approach with unions and with businesses and with local government and combined authorities, but also the third sector and social enterprise as well. And then thirdly, I think colleagues touched on this earlier on, but just to recognise that kind of untapped potential of the life science sector, the creative industries and digital innovation, but also arts and humanities and social sciences as well. They've got to come as part of the package for me, and do it in a way that doesn't leave communities excluded. And we've seen digital exclusion through the pandemic and other things, so there's a real opportunity for us to work together on that. From Durham University's perspective, and just to be really clear, we're absolutely committed to playing our part locally and in the region, and to support devolution and any regional arrangements, but also to really get in behind a much more ethical approach to inclusive growth and prosperity. Back to you, Alan.
Brilliant, thank you. We're going to turn to questions. Chia, I know you have to go. No problem at all.
Questions are the best bit, but
Maybe you can catch Chi afterwards. Right, yes, so we're going to turn to questions. Yes, gentleman over there.
Thank you. Frank Miller from CPI, part of the High Value Manufacturing Council. I also chair the North East Regional Council.
Sorry, we'll get you a microphone. Just 1 second, thanks.
Sorry, thanks. I'm Frank Miller. I lead CPI, one of the centres of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, and I'm the chair of the North East Regional membership of the CBI. I'd like to talk about accelerating the availability of private investment capital outside the concentration of the South East to speed up the economy in the places of the North. I think we've heard a great eloquent description of the potential. We spend a lot of time with spin-out startups and scale-up companies, and access to capital is the number one issue.
Excellent question, thank you. Sarah, can I turn to you first on that?
Yeah, I agree. I hear that a lot as well. I remember being in Scotland at a kind of innovation roundtable we were holding, and they also were trying to drive a sort of capital investment community for Scotland because they struggle with this. I've also spoken to people who are on the investment side of capital investment who are told by the powers that be to sort of own, they only want them to invest in certain places or institutions, and so they're working to a very narrow brief. So I think there is an opportunity, but a significant challenge for the UK to really work on its stories and its promotion of itself as an innovation country internationally, and I struggle with this because I think along a spectrum, you could take a very, very top-down approach and say, well, we're going to sort of divide up R&D strengths across different regions. We're going to label the map with, you're good at this and you're good at that. And I think that, to me, is way too far down. It doesn't recognise the real nature and evolution of research and innovation. But actually understanding our research strengths geographically as well as discipline-wise and infrastructure-wise is a fundamental first, and then being much, much better at packaging them up into, compelling, attractive stories for investors that really begin to sort of layer up not only the research and investment opportunity, but also what can be done at a local and regional level to sort of add to the investment opportunity. I did visit Liverpool University and look at some of their industry collaborations a couple of years ago, and that was something that they talked about as having been very valuable for them in attracting direct investment. But the issue you point to, I think, is a huge issue. And that there's one nationally for the whole of the UK, and that our capital investment portfolio isn't strong enough or big enough. But then there's a particular other one that it's regionally. It can be very, very focused in certain places. And, I presume that people with smarter and better ideas in Treasury and CBI maybe can think about, what incentives and levers work. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I think that there is an important issue here for Labour as to whether they take a view where along the spectrum of free markets they go, because you can take a very free market approach and say, we want foreign direct investment and we'll have it wherever they want to go, or you can take a much more managed approach and say we want to develop regional economies, and so we have a strong regional investment strategy. And where do they? I don't think I've heard yet where they want to sit on that spectrum, but I think that's an important question.
Brilliant. We'll come to Rain for CBI's bright ideas.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm sure I should probably throw the question back to you. I'm sure you would have some brilliant answers, and thank you for your support as part of our council. I guess on a few reflections. I think one, some work we did as CBI Economics with Data City was just looking at how the opportunity from the net zero economy, does correlates with areas and regions in the UK where we need to see more economic growth. So I think we know the potential is there, and there's some interesting data almost sort of mapping that out, partly to have that available, particularly for local leaders, and that's, not just, more local even than sort of metro mayors and local councillors as well. I think second look, and this is going kind of big in terms of thinking, I think your question was partly around how do you find funding for some of these green innovations in particular. And look, from a macro context, and I think what the government has done, it's been great that Labour have also committed to following through, is on the green finance strategy and the green taxonomy. So some of the ways and transition plans, right? So this is about trying to categorise what counts as a green investment, which is part of a way of making it easier, I suppose, to connect some of the pools of capital there are to where green investments. But to be honest, the much harder bit, which is where you could probably come back, is almost from when you're a small company and trying to raise finance, obviously starting at bank finance, venture capital, equity, and how do you then also scale up? And obviously the Scale Up Institute have done some really interesting work, but we know that in the UK, the challenge is we can create the startups, right? But being able to grow them and find the funding at each stage is hard. And you're right, particularly, right? That's harder in regions. It shouldn't be, right? Capital should flow across, but we know it is, right? And I think the British Business Bank, the Business Growth Fund have done some interesting work, and I feel there must be ways of trying to sort of scale that up. But I feel I've done a brilliant, apart from some general levers and diagnosis of the problem without a brilliant solution. But I think I've identified one of the things we do need to get better in the UK on.
Yeah. Shaid?
My comment would be about, and having been the kind of person in industry looking for that kind of funding previously, I think, and linking it to the place-based bit, I think we have to be really careful that in creating an ecosystem in a region or a particular locality, that we then wrap a huge amount of bureaucracy around it that makes that transition from one place to the other that much more difficult. And I think there have been times in the past, and there's a delicate balancing act here, of course. We need to make sure that we have the right governance in place. But I think a greater trust of local governance arrangements to ensure that we're telling the story in the way that Sarah's describing in a fit-for-purpose way, and to have those direct conversations with capital markets, I think is going to be really helpful. Trust the governance of your politicians locally, and trust the governance of the institutions that are going to work together to try and make this a reality with local people. For me, keep the bureaucracy low.
Right, next. Gentleman there, and I'll take two at a time if that's all right.
Hi, thank you. Joe Dockery. I'm chair of the board at Durham University, but I was reflecting that most of my career, if not all of it, has in some way had a role in what's currently described as levelling up, whether it's skills, place-based regeneration, inward investment, access to finance. And I was speaking to a chap now retired who was responsible for bringing Nissan to the Northeast. He's actually a PhD from Durham. And we were reflecting that both of us have had a career, in essence, trying to level up, and none of it's worked. And, if we look at, the UK, we know that London and the Southeast are the only two parts of the country where their GDP average exceeds the average of the EU, the only ones, and that's the average of the EU, not Germany. And Will Hutton reported 2 weeks ago, I haven't verified this, but if you take London and the Southeast out of the UK, the GDP is lower than Mississippi, which is the poorest state in America. And so my question, I suppose, is, geography does seem to matter, but is there a role for innovation in itself to help that levelling up process? What are the panel's views on that?
Right, we'll take the gentleman's question there as well, and then panel, I think, can just choose which ones they like.
As a sort of counterpoint to what's just been said, I live in Farnborough, which is has a place where success breeds success, which makes it more difficult for other places to attract. Rather bizarrely, Farnborough has a science nucleus without a university. Admittedly, it has a very strong university just down the road in Surrey. But one of the problems I think that Farnborough has, which may be the problem elsewhere, is the way that kinetic has evolved. It's moved away from development more into pure research, and so there's less opportunity for people to do the sort of prototype production work that used to be the story about the old RAE. And so Farnborough Technical College, which was there to train the technicians for the old RAE, has sort of lost its way. It's sort of hairdressing. So I think it's important that FE maintains its role for the intermediate skills as well as the top skills that the universities provide.
Right, so we've got innovation to drive levelling up, and how would you put that? Less development and perhaps too much research and not enough development. Should we put it that way? Who would like to come first in that? Rain, can I turn to you first?
Maybe just picking up on the comment from Will around, where does just this challenge, right? The context of regional growth. I mean, I think you can play with the stats. There's probably, I maybe if the US, if we took out California and New York, and I don't know, but I think what we do know, right, is there is a challenge in the UK. I'm not a fan of the levelling up term, right, because it sort of implies it's just not aspirational, right? I don't think we are you want local communities and regions that are thriving, and but I think how do we do that? It is hard. It comes down to these long-term drivers of better transport connections, new point, skills, and I think particularly in the UK, right, people actually don't move around, mobility between regions is lower, and some of that is a virtue, right? People stay in the local communities, and but that it can help with social capital, but it does mean that matching people to where growth and where their skills are is more challenging, and obviously there's a whole role for universities and further education colleges, and but obviously here we're trying to talk about innovation, and I do think I think what you were touching on around having anchor firms, and we do know that the work about regions that are great at attracting FDI, not only do you see the benefit directly from that company and institution, but also that helps to drive up productivity and in supply chains, and ideas travel, basically ideas and innovation travel, and they travel out from region. So I think the more we can do to nurture that, to set out how we make the UK competitive in a global sphere, I think is really important.
Shaid?
Two quick comments on the innovation for levelling up. One is that I do think there's a danger that it's isolated and it's not connected to a wider plan. So if we were to innovate in Durham, we know that we've got coastal communities, we've got local rural communities, and the transport system is not the best. So if we were going to try and level up, and we had created a particular zone that we wanted to do some work with, and we wanted to work with children, young people or families from those rural communities or those coastal communities, getting them to that place is going to be really, really difficult. And I think one of the challenges that LSIPs have is to make sure that the local skills improvement plans have, is to make sure that they are holistic, that they don't just focus on the science or the engineering or the innovation piece, but they wrap around it all the stuff around transport and health and other mechanisms that make that area tick and work. And then in terms of the FE piece, I think there's a really, it's timely. I think there's time for a really serious conversation between universities and further education colleges to think about making some local deals for their local areas about who does what. So you were talking about a focus on the intermediate piece. I think there's a conversation that says, well, what levels do universities do versus what levels should further education colleges do? And instead of competing for particular learners at particular levels, actually we try and create a very local system through collaboration, through agreement, that says actually we play to each other's strengths here and let's work together on that. And I think in that way you can join up things much better, and people have got a progression pathway that they can go through, whereas at the moment it feels quite disconnected between the two. And not everybody wants to necessarily go to university straight away, or not everybody wants to go to university, and we get that. That doesn't stop, I think, universities working well with those institutions to do it.
Brilliant. Sarah and Dad?
Yeah, thanks. Tricky question on the levelling up one. I think, we have to acknowledge that, just investing money is not, necessarily going to bring an answer without some innovation as well. I was just reflecting on talks I've heard over the last couple of days. There's been a lot of talks, in fact, Onwurah have hosted one, on better use of data and digital to improve public services. And so you think, well, in order to achieve levelling up, you could imagine that not too far away, a future where you actually have a much more highly tuned understanding of the status quo of needs of transport and education and so on, that by central government, that helps to provide better services and therefore better innovation locally. And thinking about the public opinion work that we've done, there was a focus group we did in Manchester, and somebody at the focus group heard for the first time about graphene and was somewhat offended that no one had told her so far. She was very proud that this was a brilliant, globally important sort of local innovation, and was saying, well, what am I expected? Why should I have to go out and find out about this? Why haven't you told me? Why isn't it on my Facebook feed? Basically. And I think, it might sound trite, but I think actually, really sort of boosting people's awareness and pride and enthusiasm about research and innovation coming out of their local area could do something to sort of generate more energy around, innovative industries in local areas that could, help keep people there, help keep people interested in being in those industries. So I think, there's something more to be done there. On Farnborough, I think, you also point to the role of government in terms of public sector research establishments, in terms of, seeding innovation across the UK, because they do have the power to embed institutions in places. But to me, absolute firm thing that I would say is that an integrated skills strategy is essential, one that integrates lifelong learning, technical education, further and higher education, holistically and dynamically, because our skills plan for the country is not one that we should design and then stop. It's one that should be dynamic, and that I think will help us really sort of leverage local strengths and really develop homegrown talent, keep people in places where they want to be, give them the opportunity to remain where they want to be if they want to.
I'm going to take the chair's prerogative just for a moment, just to ask. I'd love to get an idea, really, of what specific examples or specific interventions that we need to see from, I guess, both national. We've talked a little bit about devolution and what local governments need to do. I'd love to dig a little bit more into that, if we could. Shaid, could I ask you about where has this gone right? What more do we need to see? Where do we need to see this replicated elsewhere?
Okay, so there's clearly, I think in some respects the universities have been in the national eye line for all the wrong reasons, and there's a real opportunity for universities to think about how they make sure that they are clear about their role and what they bring to a growth agenda and how they can help with that. And I think that the decision around Horizon Europe was very welcomed, but we've got another decision point in 2027. We need to think, well, what I'd love to hear from the Labour Party is that, they're going to make sure that they support that in 2027, and they would extend it. Clearly the challenges around undergraduate fees are still there, but if there isn't any huge amounts of funding coming forward post-election, then we have to think about what we do with the money that we spend on education, right across higher education and further education in particular, and think about whether there's a case at times around regional economies with place-based strategic approaches, whether we try and help with the balance around that. And what that can do is then incentivize additional funding from government because it's leveraged against a very clear priority with an ecosystem that's working particularly well together. I could go on about visas and everything else, but I won't. I'll give somebody else a chance to sort that.
Rain, anything to add on that?
I think I suppose just adding to the issue around visas and more broadly, I think celebrating the value that international students can add to local communities, to our universities, but also to our soft power around the world, I think is really important and something we should celebrate. And I think more broadly we need to think about our funding for universities and make sure that is, on a sustainable footing over, both to address that, we know there's the reverse of a demographic dividend, if you like. I mean, it's a potential, right? We know there's going to be more domestic students hitting universities by 2030. So we need to make sure we've got the right provision, and that we have a long-term plan.
Sarah.
I'm going to throw in an international one. I think often when we talk and think about localities and we're thinking about the levelling up question, it feels like a UK kind of domestic regional agenda, but actually international investment into places in the UK, invests in local economies. So I think, if your challenge is what can central government do, I'd put it on the Foreign Office, FCDO, and a significant comms plan from the government to make that attractive pitch for places in the UK for investment.
Brilliant. Gentleman there, you wanted to ask a question. I think we've got microphone just there.
Thank you very much. My name's Anthony Manchester. I'm from BlackRock. We manage this. My question relates to a point Sarah just made about localities, but we manage pensions for millions of people, and we find lots of people want to invest in their local communities, and I think that could be a key way of re-engaging people with financial services. But in order to do that, of course, we need to invest in something for them that's going to generate a return, because that's return is the income for their pension. And so I was wondering what the panel thought about some of the changes that were made to allow Andy Burnham and others to borrow more money and to leverage some more money on a longer term basis, because I think that kind of devolution of fiscal responsibility, we think is really good and could be expanded, including places like Glasgow, which I think is something the SNP has been less keen on doing, but there's a demand for it there. And also, relatedly, what do you think about the role of local government pension schemes in investing in their local communities, and again, trying to promote growth on that sort of regional basis?
Rain, could I come to you on that one?
Look, I think it's a great question. I think there's a lot in it. I do think having looking at more flexibility within our pension funds in terms of the asset classes in which they can be invested, right, is, you only need to look at some of the large pension funds, from Canada and more, that are doing a lot of the infrastructure investment in the UK. It feels that we have a big pool of asset classes. So, and I know the government have done some work on this, and there's certainly more to be done around that. I think and this issue around, allowing localities to borrow more, and you can, again, think of this sort of US system, right, with municipal bonds. There's certainly a real opportunity there. I suppose the economist in me would just say, I guess there needs to be some, there will be others who can think about how you design it, because what you don't want to have is, local areas then taking on too much debt, or it has to obviously be, as you were suggesting, matched by the return. I think the other area where there's a real opportunity, right, we've seen some really interesting things even around Leeds and more broadly around local climate bonds, right? Because I think that's often, it's marrying that with not just I want to invest in my local community, I want to invest in making my local community cleaner, greener, and so I think there is a really interesting space about how we can unlock more of that.
Shaid?
Yeah, just to build on Rain's contribution, really. I think there's think the fiscal incentives I was talking about in my earlier contribution was linked to what mayoral combined authorities might be able to do in the space of lending and particularly borrowing for capital investment. Particularly, I think there's an opportunity to think about under regional on a broader regional development footprint, the kind of borrowing that we might bring in place through those routes to enable the stimulation of the kind of innovation that Joe was referring to as well. And in terms of local government pension schemes, I've got a local government pension schemes, I panicked a little bit there. However, putting that to the side, I wonder whether there's an opportunity to kind of, particularly with it being local government and the kind of premise that people who work for local government have got a kind of an ethical approach to the way that we interrelate with our communities, whether there's an opportunity to also not just look at return on investment, but look at the return on social investment and think about how we ensure that the pound that's spent in Leeds or the pound that's spent in Durham stays in Durham as well. An opportunity to maximise that too.
Sarah, and to add on that?
Just really briefly, I mean, I've heard from a couple of combined authorities that they really want devolved decision-making authority, especially around innovation, which is what I've been speaking to them about. I can't say that it's only a couple of combined authorities I've spoken to, so it's not an extensive survey. But when we did our Power of Place report and we were going around to sort of civic leadership and local authorities and so on, there was quite a marked variation across the UK as to those where you could find someone who felt it was their job to engage in a research and innovation conversation, and some places where you would really struggle, not only to get someone to come, but to find someone who felt that was anything to do with their local authorities, role. So I did feel from that experience that, perhaps some incentives for local authorities, civic leaders to feel a responsibility for connecting with research and innovation businesses and academic in their area would be valuable. And maybe one way of doing that is by devolving some budget to them. There might be other ways, but I do think I noticed that anyway. There was a very, very wide variation across the UK, and that sense of ownership in local authorities was highly correlated with economic success through research and innovation in those areas. Brilliant.
Right. If there are no other questions, I think we'll be able to wrap it up. Okay, great. First of all, thank you to the University of Durham for partnering with us on this brilliant event. I hope you agree. It's been fantastic. Second of all, thank you to you, the audience, for sticking with us. And lastly, thank you to our brilliant panel, Chi, who sadly had to leave early, Sarah, Shaid, and Rain. Thank you, everyone.